Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Thursday, February 26th. I'm your host, Amanda Borschel-Dan, here in our Jerusalem studio with editor David Horovitz. David, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Sure. Hi, Amanda.
Hi. Today here in Jerusalem, it is cloudy with a chance of missiles, and all eyes are on Geneva for the renewed third set of talks between the US and Iran over its nuclear program. We're also going to hear about the visit from India's Prime Minister yesterday. He's leaving this afternoon. And we're going to talk about renewed efforts at the Western Wall to tamp down egalitarian prayer. So all of this and more when we're back. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here in our Jerusalem studio with David Horovitz, our editor. Now, David, we are, of course, looking towards Geneva to hear about the chance for any kind of negotiated deal between the U.S. and Iran. But in the meantime, of course, the U.S. has parked here on Israeli soil, I believe it is 11 F-22 fighter planes, the most impressive fighter plane in the world, as far as I understand, and more are on the way. So what do you make of this pretty clear signal that all eyes are pointing and many guns are pointing to these talks?
Yeah, you've got two processes unfolding simultaneously. You've got negotiations and you've got the endless, long-standing now, building up of forces, including, as you say, F-22s. It's a stealth fighter. It's I don't think it's common, to put it mildly. It may be unprecedented to have it stationed, certainly not in Israel before. I heard the reporter, a colleague of ours actually, who went to visit an American airplane manufacturing facility where they build others as well as the F-22. And the whole F-22 area, which was a closed production line, had been tarpaulined off so they couldn't see it. And now we have them at Ben Gurion Airport. I think it might be a little more than 11 by now. So this, obviously this is a threat being built by the United States at the same time as right now as we talk. They are meeting in Geneva. With a great deal of pessimism, because the Iranian positions, the things that they've said publicly are not acceptable to the United States. And this is not the first time that they've been talking, and Trump has indicated that sort of time is running out. So America is trying to build this deterrent threat to try to get the Iranians to concede. There was a huge concession already at the beginning of these talks, in that they're only dealing with Iran's nuclear program, where Israel wants to deal with the ballistic missile threat that Iran poses, its support for proxies. And what I think is interesting, since we last did a daily, i.e. since yesterday, is two very prominent American figures turning up their rhetoric where Iran is concerned. You've had the vice president and you've had the secretary of state. So J.D. Vance said, among other things, we've seen that they are making efforts to rebuild their nuclear program. And you've had Marco Rubio saying the same thing, and also saying that the president prefers a diplomatic solution. But if there is to be one, not only do these talks have to succeed on making sure that Iran takes a deal with no sunset clauses, according to negotiator Steve Witkoff, that means they can never get the bomb. But then, says Rubio, we'll need to move on to that ballistic missile threat and the proxies. So if you just looked at that, you would say there's no way these talks are going to work, and America is getting ready to attack. You can add into the mix a report from Politico. It's not named officials talking, as far as I know, saying it would be more convenient for the Americans if Israel hit first, because then Iran would hit back at Israel, and then there'd be more support in America for the United States to get involved. That underlines that there is a domestic political consideration for Trump as well. And of course, Iran knows that, and therefore all the complexity. Trump wants to stop them. I think it's a big deal in his State of the Union. He acknowledged that Iran is trying again, because if you'll remember, he kept saying obliterated and they won't do it again, they'd be crazy to, kind of thing. So that's quite significant as well. So all these factors can lead you to different conclusions. And the one conclusion that I'm sure has been said many times, certainly outside this podcast and probably on it too, the only person who knows is the president. Maybe he took a decision, maybe he didn't. But as far as we know, only he knows.
If you're looking a little more zoomed out at this whole process, which is always interesting to do, we're seeing other unrest among nations that aren't exactly allies of the U.S., meaning there was the incident this week in which Cuba fired on a U.S. boat in its own waters, I believe, but still. And then we're also seeing signs that Iran is trying to pick up more missile tech from China. I mean, the whole zoom out paints a pretty troubling picture. And I just wonder if this is the moment, if this is the moment in which we're going to have some kind of reckoning of the big, great forces at work along the globe, or am I just kind of playing risk here with what we're talking about?
I think there's greater concern about China, and there's even concern about Iran-China contacts and the fact of what may be going on in terms of trade and transfer of technology and know-how. Um, I don't know that there's any reason to think. I mean, the world's a bad place. There are conflicts all the time. There are certain tensions. I mean, Cuba, is way out of left field at the moment, but next week it could be somewhere else, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago it was Venezuela, and so on. I'm not sure. I think Iran is a huge threat. I wouldn't make comparative assessments, but where Israel's concerned, it's an existential threat. These are terrible people, this regime. I think if you want to take a zoom out, I would make the point that this whole round of friction started because the people of Iran went out and demonstrated, and Trump said help is on the way. That somehow metamorphosed into talks on its nuclear program, right? What was meant to be happening here was the people trying to shed a vicious, misogynistic, death culty regime, and Trump saying, yeah, we'll come to help you because Biden didn't and Obama didn't. Instead of which, we've got talks on Iran's nuclear program, which until not very long ago, Trump was assuring us was no kind of concern at all.
So the Israeli public, for the most part, does seem to support some kind of campaign in which Israel joins up with the US against Iran. What kind of numbers are you seeing? Do you have anything at hand?
In terms of what the polling support, yeah, the one poll I saw had about something close to 60% Israeli support for Israel getting involved. Listen, Israel doesn't want to get involved. I mean, let's just take a step back on this as well. So now you've got the United States negotiating with Iran because they according to the leading officials in the administration, are rebuilding their nuclear program. That does not need to be an Israeli conflict. Israel would be a real consequence of Iran getting the bomb. This is the world superpower saying to an incredibly dangerous regional would-be hegemon, you can't be doing this. We've told you, we've hit you already. So Israelis are not, hey, clamoring to get us in there. We're all sitting there day after day, and every night the last week, somebody very smart has said to me, oh, it's going to be tonight. Didn't you know, David? And I'm like, no, I don't know, and nobody knows. So it is our conflict in a way, but it's not like Israelis are, oh, please, let's get us. No, but we do want this regime. We want this regime gone. This regime is terrible for its own people. It's terrible for the region. It's a direct threat to Israel. It wants to see us destroyed. It says so all the time. It arms and funds Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and militias in Iraq. And Trump has made the point, it's widening its missile range. It's brought Europe within range. This is a threat to the world. We're caught in it. We're certainly part of it. But it's not like Israel is... No. The United States feels an obligation with all kinds of domestic considerations. That's what we're seeing playing out here now.
Okay, let's take a bit of a cynical political look at it as well, however. And our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Iran has been his rallying cry to the world for, can we say decades at this point?
Yeah,
I mean, he's
sure.
definitely brought it up at the UN more than once. And I just wonder if this too plays into, his campaign, because as we all know, there is an election this year. The very latest date, as far as I understand, is October 27th, I believe. And as this is playing out, what are you seeing in terms of Netanyahu's figures for support?
No, first of all, you're talking to me, and I'm, to put it mildly, not always complimentary about Netanyahu. I have real issues with the way the Gaza war has been handled, the way the Gaza war has now veered off into a reality where Hamas is in control of most of the people of Gaza again, and still half the territory. And if you read Laser Berman's piece earlier this week, or my little summary of it, Hamas is doing everything, and very effectively, to make sure that even ostensible non-Hamas post-war institutions will be Hamas-dominated. That's not going well. There should have been a state commission of inquiry. It probably would have recommended that Netanyahu needs to step down. So that's part of the the answer to your question. On Iran, I'm somebody who thought that the Obama deal was a terrible deal. The argument that he couldn't have got a better deal through the UN, I don't buy it. It allowed Iran to continue to develop its technology. When they chose to break it, they were able to break it. Trump pulled out of it. I'm not sure that was the smartest thing. This has not been handled well. These are very bad people. And therefore, in my opinion, for the benefit of the world, the Iranians and Israel, this regime in Iran needs to go. How do you do that? The people help unseat it, and you give them support. You make it harder for the regime to crack down on them. There are all kinds of things, some of which were probably done in the last few weeks. I don't know exactly, right? But does that happen to work well for Netanyahu? If there is a definitive victory over Iran, probably. If it's a fiasco, If there's a limited strike and they survive it, if there's a negotiation and a lousy deal, probably doesn't help him so much. Of course, you're right. It's not being cynical. It's putting everything in the context of Israeli politics. The longer there is since October the 7th, the more successes there are against Hezbollah, the better it looks for Netanyahu regionally. Yes, he'll even time the election to profit as best he can. But apart from the political reality, the practical, the real essence here is important. It's not just about domestic politics.
Let's go to a short break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here in our Jerusalem studio with editor David Horovitz. Prime Minister of India Modi is currently in Israel, and yesterday he was hosted at the Knesset. It was quite the to-do in terms of the speeches that came out and also the behind-the-scenes events that led up to it. So, David, let's talk first about the messaging that came out between Modi and our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And the one thing that leaped out to me was the idea of confronting Islamic extremism. And that's, of course, something that India faces and obviously Israel faces as well. So what was said on this?
I mean, what was striking in the body language, in the informal remarks, and most especially in the speech, Netanyahu's speech was very warm and welcoming, but Modi's speech was, I mean, we don't hear those speeches anymore in the what much of the world considers now the pariah state of Israel. Here you have a leader of a colossal powerhouse country saying, we stand with you. We're trying to tackle the jihadists. Every death on October the 7th is seared into the consciousness. I'm paraphrasing that. It's not exactly what he said, but he said every person in India sends their condolences for all the deaths. Actually somebody who's looking at reality and describing it and empathizing the way a normal person would. And it was utterly abnormal. That's not what we've had here. We've had conditional and, partial support on one extreme, and the other extreme is complete condemnation and misrepresentation of everything that's happened. So this powerhouse leader comes to Israel and basically tells the truth and says this is terrible. And that was very moving, very powerful for Israelis.
Ending with Am Yisrael Chai.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
And it was just great. Of course, this being Israel, this could not take place without some kind of political controversy. And it's really, I mean, I was in our previous part of this podcast was somewhat empathetic to Netanyahu. So let me be completely critical of Netanyahu now, where the Speaker of the Knesset chose not to invite, for the umpteenth time, the President of the Supreme Court to a formal state event. I say the Speaker of the Knesset, he works for Netanyahu. If Netanyahu had wanted Yitzhak Amit to come to yesterday's state event, there he would have been. So Netanyahu did not intervene. He was quite happy for the President of the Supreme Court to be shamed. And the opposition felt they did not want to be part of this. And therefore, when the session started, I think all the opposition MKs left the chamber. The Benny Gantz came back a little earlier, if I'm not mistaken. And then when Modi was getting ready to speak, then Yair Lapid, the leader of the opposition, and the rest of the opposition came back in, and Lapid asked for the microphone for a couple of minutes and said to Modi, we didn't leave because of you. This has nothing to do with you. It's wonderful that you're here, and thank you very much. In the interim, because the Likud, because Netanyahu, because the speaker did not want to be embarrassed by a half-empty house that he had created, they invited all kinds of former Likud Knesset members, people you would never wish to see or hear from again, to take the seats of the opposition MKs. So you had MKs walking out, ex-MKs walking in, staying in when the opposition came back in, crowding Modi at the end of his speech. Again, people, we'll just go with Oren Chazan, who's somebody you can
Mr. Selfie, shall we say?
You can look him up and find out what he did when Trump landed one of the visits ago, whatever. So it was a bit of a, musical chairs is a really polite way of saying it. Disgrace would probably be closer to reality. Modi was unfazed. I'm sure he's been through many scenes far worse than that, but it was a little shameful for Israel.
It was raucous. It was a bit of a Bollywood film for sure, and we're not so used to that here in Israel. In a strange way, we're actually pretty decorous in the Knesset, plus minus, shall we say?
We've been looking at the same parliament. I mean, endless heckling and interruptions and unpleasant. And Yuli Edelstein shuttering the House at one point a few years ago. They've done some. It's not some of those parliaments where you see people beating themselves in each other up, as the speaker's trying to speak, or it doesn't. That doesn't happen, and mercifully did not happen.
Exactly. Okay, but in terms of what Modi was here to accomplish, we talked about the extremist, Islam aspect of it, but there was also a big business aspect of it. And what kind of deals are you expecting to see come out of this?
Well, a lot of the trip, it's still going on. So he's seeing innovative companies, he's seeing tech companies. There's lots of trade potential and lots of trade already being done. There's grandiose planning for sort of regional transport and beyond regional transport systems that have been discussed again with, the possibility of projects, linking India and Israel in many places besides, which have been talked about for a long time. But you've got this extraordinary warmth of relationship between the leaderships and beyond the individuals, that you've got two countries that are obviously very comfortable with each other. We should add that India is very savvy on the world stage. It has good relations with people who really hate Israel as well. I don't know where its current Iran relationship stands, but Modi himself has had, workable, even warm relations with this regime in Iran. So he's a very savvy politician. And nonetheless, I would say, just this bolt from the blue of somebody, oh, it was terrible what happened to you, and we're with you all the way. That was really quite something.
All right, let's talk about our final issue, which is something that keeps popping up across the decades, and I'm talking about the idea of egalitarian prayer at the Western Wall. And last week we had on the program Rosala Terkatin and Jeremy Sharon, and we discussed the Supreme Court hearing, which ordered the government essentially to, yes, implement a plan that is 10 years in coming to create this expanded, permanent, egalitarian prayer platform in the archaeological park that abuts the Western Wall Plaza. Sound complicated? It is. And in the meantime, the sole MK from a far right party called Noam, his name is Avi Maoz, has floated a preliminary bill which passed yesterday, which essentially would give the entirety of the Western Wall to be under the control of the chief rabbinate. And so also in this bill, I believe in the language of the bill, it makes egalitarian prayer a desecration, something along these lines. David,
Yeah.
fill in the blanks here.
Just, I want to ask you a question because you've done a lot of reporting on this yourself. The area where you could have mixed bar mitzvahs and ceremonies is open.
Correct. It is open. However, the platform that is directly on the Western Wall, where you could touch the rocks, is closed since, I believe, 2018, when a piece of the Western Wall fell. It's since being repaired. And the last time I was there, all I saw was a flimsy police barrier closing that off. It has been about a year since I was there. But it really could be opened at any point. The Israel Antiquities Authority has signed off on it. It just basically is caught in this bureaucratic maelstrom.
And beyond that existing area, which is still usable but not fully usable, there's supposed to be a wider, better egalitarian prayer area, correct?
Right. So Naftali Bennett, when he was the diaspora minister, I believe it was in 2013, built this temporary platform, which is still in use. Now, from my perspective, it's a bit rickety. I would describe it as bleachers being put up for a parade and just left there for so long. If you look from the bottom up, which I've done several times, meaning you go down into the archaeological park and you look up at the platform, the wood is warped. The stairs are definitely not anywhere near any kind of safety protocol. And you can just see that, okay, it's not going to crumble and fall probably while people are on it, but it's not anywhere near the respectable permanent platform that was promised to the people over a decade ago.
Right, so you've now got the Supreme Court saying, hey, you need to fix up and do what you were supposed to do, and instead you've got the government supporting. I think Netanyahu gave a free vote, but it went through quite easily. The preliminary passage, in other words, it would need 3 more readings of a law that would indeed give the rabbinate full control. And in the law, I think the word desecration is used as regards non-Orthodox Judaism. And in the original law relating to the Western Wall, desecrating the Western Wall is punishable by 7 years in jail. Right, so put 2 and 2 together, and that's a pretty terrible picture, given the legitimacy of non-Orthodox streams of Judaism anywhere except under the aegis of this Israeli government. I mean, it's unthinkable. When the famous Western Wall compromise was scrapped one Sunday morning by a previous Netanyahu government. The diaspora said you're basically demonizing and delegitimizing the majority of Jews, certainly in the diaspora, right? The majority of Jews in the diaspora. Um, the fact that Netanyahu kind of held this bill back for a while indicated some concern. The fact that he then allowed it to progress a little bit, he's playing. The word isn't fire. He's playing with the identity of much of world Jewry, and he's doing so as the leader of the only Jewish state on earth who sees himself as the representative of the Jews of the world. It's unacceptable. It's unnecessary. It's extreme. I don't know how far this bill is going to go. It is, as you said, it's the work of a very, very extreme, look him up, Knesset member who was part of the coalition, is not part of the coalition anymore when Netanyahu needed him, and that one vote, he had him in there. It's not a mainstream Israeli issue. Most Israelis don't really know much about it. A lot of Israelis don't know much about non-Orthodox Judaism. But it's just an incendiary blow to non-Orthodox Judaism, and one would hope that this legislation would die a quiet death. I'm not sure that's what's going to happen.
Don't you think, though, David, that it's just a puppet show, meaning this whole thing is playing out and people pulling the strings are really fighting a greater war, and it's basically yet again the government versus the Supreme Court? When this preliminary reading took place and passed, the Justice Minister Yariv Levin crowed how happy he was that it did pass. He is also, I believe, the religions minister, coincidentally, which I learned just this week. But in any case,
You mean he's filling in because the
because
ultra-Orthodox religious affairs minister is not in the coalition, is not in the government at the moment? Yeah.
exactly, right. And so in any case, once I heard his statement, I thought, okay, this is not really about the Western Wall at all. This is yet again going head to head with, the judiciary and the executive and legislature, because they're basically one fist at this point.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. You're right that it's part of a wider political game, but it's all about the nature of Israel. So it's about the nature of its judiciary and the balance of power here, and the branches of governments. But it's also about religion and what Israel has to say and what Israel represents in terms of Judaism. And it's the marginalizing of an approach that this government is not prepared to tolerate because of the nature of this government. It's shocking, except it isn't anymore, that the Likud, which did not used to be a religiously extreme party and did not used to be a marginalize the judiciary party, is leading both of these processes. There are other processes that are going on. We talk about them all the time. We're talking about settler violence in the West Bank. We've had days where activists, some of them linked to the Likud, have been harassing an Arab-Israeli TV anchor who lit a torch on Independence Day because she's so much a part of the Zionist mainstream. There are terrible forces at play here, and many of them, you're right, take place in a political context. But there's no just to or only to that assessment. Does it make it better or does it make it worse that a lot of this is politics? I think it makes it worse. If this is what you need to do for your politics, well, then your politics is shoddy. If this is what you need to do to stay in power, then you shouldn't be in power. If you have to destroy the branches of government, the balance of power in Israel, if you have to demonize non-Orthodox Judaism to retain power, you're doing something wrong. And saying it's politics, which I know is not what you're saying, but it's not like it's only politics. It's terrible politics.
David, thank you so much for this uplifting conversation again. No,
We'll do an upbeat one soon, right?
we definitely will. Thanks so much for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by Gabriella Jacobs and video edited by Ari Schlacht. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.